two teams are in a similar position in that people expect this from the All Blacks and they're a little bit down here. And the Welsh team also, there's much higher expectations in the performance that they've been delivering. So what do you think are the ways to get out of a slump like that?
Well, especially in Wales, is that they expect a lot more than probably what they have been getting. And they did have an amazing team, or a very good team, from about 2011 through to about 2019, and it went for another couple of years as well, because they did win the Six Nations in 2021 as well. But because they had those very good players, they probably stayed with those players for a long period of time, and then a lot of them, you know, they played 80, 90, 100 tests, then they all kind of retired and moved on, and maybe they hadn't blooded through a few more players to come through, and it's now a very young squad, and so then, or an experienced squad that probably hasn't played as much test footy as they would have liked. And with doing that as well, so the team was going well, and with the international side doing so well, it might have papered over a few cracks that were appearing in the regional game, and that funding going back into the regional game might not quite have gone to the right people or to the organisations. Those organisations at times are also at loggerheads with the international game as well. There's probably not as good a communication between what New Zealand Rugby and sometimes the Super Rugby sides do have here, because they're all owned by New Zealand Rugby. Apart from the Blues have a share.
Most have private ownership, but not majority.
Not majority. And so then, but in Wales, they are all private ownership. So Wales Rugby Union doesn't have a huge amount of say over what they can do. So it's similar to what is in England as well. So how those organisations spend their money is up to them, and it probably hasn't been reinvested back into the grassroots within those regions, or within the coaching coming through as well. So I think, yeah, there's a bit to work on, but hopefully, you know, a win in the weekend and a bit, you know, hopefully, you know, we can see them bouncing back and just getting better and better. New coaching team coming in as well, which, you know, Steve Tandy, he's done a different pathway as well. He was in Wales. He then went to the Waratahs for 6 years. For 6 years, I think it was, with Daryl Gibson and over there. And then he also went to Scotland as well for the last few years as well. So he's coming back to Wales with a bit of experience, and experience from outside of Wales too. So hopefully he can do a great job. The boys like him. He's changed a few things up apparently, and got a coaching squad around him that he has chosen. So hopefully, you know, it'll all go well going forward.
I think, like, when you have such a big exodus of that experience through a number of players, the thing that you can't prepare for is probably the things you've learned to take for granted, that you don't actually, they're not prescribed roles during the week, but senior players sort of do a lot of unseen work that not everyone knows about, and actually transferring that responsibility onto another player is probably not thought about with a lot of sides. It's just something that they do. And then when it actually comes out of the system and you haven't blooded people to fill those gaps, it can spread people pretty thin, you know, usually coaching staff, because if you don't have that experience or knowledge as players, you can't fill that void. So I think that's a big factor. It's during the week, you know, like the game is what we see, but it's what they can do or what they need to identify that's not there currently that's allowing them to transfer that onto the field under pressure.
So what you saw against Japan, and there were huge celebrations by the sounds of it in Cardiff, after getting that win after 10 straight losses at home in a row. Good reason to celebrate. They close down those streets and get into the pubs, the Angel or wherever. But what did you see there about, you know, the excitement and the development of that team?
I think the attack has gone slightly better, trying to chuck the ball around a little bit more. But what they've always been a country that kind of backed their defence, and so they went to the box kick quite a lot in the weekend, and so then in contestables, and I think they probably saw an opportunity against Japan to win back the aerial battle there, and Japan probably saw the same back with Wales. So we saw a lot of box kicking, and no one really took advantage of those that aerial game. So look, I think hopefully just a bit of character within the side, and if they can get their box kicking going well, if they can get their attack going well, and then their defence as well, hopefully, you know, contestable kicks has been an area of the game that Wales always backed themselves on, and we had a world-class couple of back three players that were very good under the high ball, and if they can get back to that, then they hopefully, you know, it's something that we kind of backed.
Yeah, I mean, the big concern for them will be, if you look at the current trend, we got a trend report this week, and looking at New Zealand, 40% of their tries come from turnovers, and that's a big stat, and it's something that New Zealand is known for, but it hasn't been that high for a long time. So I suppose that growth in New Zealand's game is concerning for Wales, having had 19 turnovers on the weekend. If you're going to turn the ball over 19 times against a side that systems thrive under that turnover conditions and players sort of come to life, I mean, it's the danger signs are there. And I think defensively they were really accurate, but they, probably don't have that big body or someone that, that can sort of just have that dominance in the collision. If you look at the teams that are consistently winning, the South Africa, the Englands, they just win collision. Like, they win collision, they have speed of ball, but more importantly, defensively, they have the highest dominant tackle rate. And so it stops attacking systems get down, and I suppose that's the big focus, I think, for Wales is, bulking up some of these young men and being able to play to the strengths that you guys had up until that 2019, sorry.
And on that defensive set as well, is that they defended for long periods of time. I think Japan, I saw a stat towards the end of the game, and the top 5 performers for ball carriers were all Japanese players. And so then you can't give the All Blacks that many opportunities. And so their defence is going to have to be onto it. But they're also you can't just defend against the All Blacks and hope to win. You actually have to score points against them, because the All Blacks are a very good counter-attacking side. And so if you don't score points, you're not going to win. And there's almost a mental block there as well, is that Wales haven't won against the All Blacks in, I think, 70 to 80 years. Or I think it was 70 years when I was there, so it'll be up there now. So, look, we had the same problem against Australia and South Africa as well. We managed to win games against them both, and now consistently we can actually, not right now, but for a period there we were winning, every second game against those teams. So you almost got to get over that little hurdle of winning one against the All Blacks, and hopefully it can turn into something like Ireland has been able to do with the All Blacks and how their performance has gone with them, and so it's been pretty tight between those two nations in the last 10 games. So
Was the conversation quite different heading into an All Blacks week because of that? Was there something different in the approach?
No, it was all, I guess for Warren there's a little bit of a personal side to it as well, but playing international footy, every team you look at, and you look at it in depthly. So you look at the Springboks, you knew they were going to be physical. They had a very good kicking game back then. Now they've got the X factor as well, and so they're almost they're the triple threat, and they're a very good side. You then looked at Australia, and what they were not as physical as the All Blacks and the Springboks, but they were a very good attacking side, and they could have X factor and skin you from anywhere. And then you looked at the All Blacks, and they had physicality, they had X factor, and a good team that. Mate, you looked at them and you said, if we give them an opportunity, they're going to take it. If we give them, we talked about the high ball game, the aerial game. If we're not accurate in that part of the game, then their counter-attacking ability is probably second to none, or it was. And I think even with Will Jordan now, he's outstanding in that aspect of the game, in counter-attack. So, it was just, if we are going to kick it, then we have to have a good chase line in play, because they can skin us from anywhere if they wanted to.
That's the 50-50 of the chaos of the high ball, right? Because New Zealand is struggling to take consistent high balls. In fact, everyone is struggling to take consistent high balls. You can get them or you can get burnt.
Yeah. But I think as well, everyone looks at the high ball catch, but for me, the teams that are doing well are just not allowing their opposition to kick on their terms. And I know we say it all the time, but if you look at some of the times the counter-rucking from South Africa or Ireland, even England on the weekend, it rushes the halfback if they're looking for a box kick. They feel those bodies starting to come over. It's a big risk, because our team's going to chance their arm. If they commit too many bodies, can they get it to width? But they seem to be efficient in the sense that they send one or two and then they'll bounce out. But by that time, you've done the damage. So I think, for Wales, having that ability to kick on their terms and maybe kick a little bit quicker, because I think if they set up the centipede, like there's going to be some bodies flying in there and it's going to probably go from bad to worse if they kick too long. It has to be a genuine contest. And then I think it's the same for New Zealand. Like they need to send bodies in there probably more than they have, especially from those wide breakdowns, to fluster the kickers, to make them feel that pressure, so that it just goes, 2 or 3 more metres further, just buys you, that second that you need to be able to then counter-attack from there.
Mm-hmm. Now, watching on the weekend and seeing Rees-Zammit back in the team, it's good to see for Wales. I mean, given, he went over to the NFL, he's come back and he seems to inject something there. Like, the Welsh love to hang on to a superstar, whether it was Gavin Henson or somebody to love, and that should bring them some optimism.
Andy Howe as well. Yes, look, he came onto the scene and was outstanding, mate. He was quick. I think he was in camp my last Six Nations. He came in and he was a good kid. Was keen, just getting stuck in. He was actually left Wales and went to Gloucester. I don't know if he went to school in England, but he was playing for Gloucester and doing extremely well in the Premiership over there. Went to the NFL, mate. You can't blame him for that opportunity, mate. If it had gone well, which I think it went relatively well, it didn't quite crack it probably as much as he wanted to, but that would have been amazing for him. And also, Wales obviously started following the NFL very closely. But to have him come back, he looks bigger. I think he still looks like he's got that quick, that speed, and he brings a bit of an entourage in a way as well, a little bit around the camp like Gavin Henson did, and a little bit more high profile, because every second article was actually almost about him in Wales Online. A great paper, by the way. And so, so it's good to see him back, and he brings a bit more of a high profile probably into that squad and what he's doing.
Were you a contributor?
We had a couple of chats.
Can I just say on that though, because every second article is about, it does take the pressure off.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't that way before he came back. It was very negative. So it does take the limelight, which the role sort of Rusty plays for South Africa is when the pressure's on, he sort of steps into that space and creates a narrative that focuses on him. As long as, I don't know Rees-Zammit personally, but I'm sure he can handle it. So there's that positive. But then I think what he learned in the NFL, not that he didn't have professional standards, but the NFL in terms of their detail and professionalism throughout the week is another level on its own. So I think, again, it's something to follow. It's sort of the Sonny Bill effect. As young men will be like, man, that's where I want to be. I want to have, what Rees-Zammit has, and they'll start, I suppose, replicating his week. And if he can have those high professional standards, then you'll just see, all boats rise. And I think that's the exciting thing from a Welsh point of view of having him in and around that environment more often.
One of the decisive things that happened in that game between Wales and Japan was when Hopkins for Japan cocked his arm, didn't do the wrap, and got the yellow. And that was for a Welsh team, it looked like they're probably going to lose it. The moment they got them straight back into that game. What is going on at the moment, do you think, with the number of players who are getting done for that kind of hit? We've seen it happen with the South Africans. Is it a coaching thing? What do you think is going on right now with that being the current yellow card du jour?
Maybe because a lot of emphasis is put on the dominant collisions and dominant tackles, and so then maybe having your arm like this, you can actually be more dominant than putting your arm like that. So if you get the first hit like that, then wrap might be a mindset, but obviously you're running a risk there as well in terms of the officials. And that did pretty much cost them the game because they were in the driver's seat there. So
I think it's an element of this second defender, because a lot of the time it's like when they just give it that one and there's not necessarily the opportunity to wrap because someone else is there, or they're very effective with that. They don't get the chance to wrap because they drop to the ground. So I think it's a little bit of, I'd say, I don't want to use the word laziness, but that's the only one I can think of right now is not dropping that body height. I spoke about it after South Africa's won last week is it's always the tall guy, or it's normally a bigger body against a little guy, and most of the time they've just started in a high position, and then as they come forward, they're not sort of in a position to sort of just drive through, so they try to utilise that. I don't think it's coached. I just think that there's definitely more focus on it from the referees.
Yeah.
They've obviously picked it up, that it's become a thing. So now we're sort of identifying it now. I'm sure there's many more before that's made the referees change. So I think you'll see behaviours change pretty quickly because it is dictating games.
Yeah.
Except for South Africa.
But they can play 12
with 12 players and still win, yeah. So I think, like players, your only currency is performance, and if you're taking yourself out of the opportunity to perform, it will become a selection issue. So normally that will dictate those behaviours changing, and you'll see the bigger men start at a lower position off that defensive line.
And in a world, like you say, where the desire to get that dominant tackle in, like, it's got to be
but it's actually not that effective, this.
Yeah.
Like, because your most powerful resource is these things.
Yeah, I can see.
And your glutes. So actually starting low and going through and getting that leg drive.
Yeah.
So technically, you just got to get low, and sprinters start low. So from a rush defence point of view, like everything points to start low. It's just when players either think they're not going to pass the ball in their area, or they've just sort of buttoned off, but then someone makes a late decision to change into their line and they're not prepared to make the from what I've seen anyway.
Yeah.
From the red cards that have been, it just looks more individual inaccuracy than anything in terms of a theme.